Hello, our dear listeners. Today, Thursday, the 29th of April, 2021. You're listening to us live from Nottingham on 97.1 FM. That's Faza Radio. We welcome you to our special show today. Behind the screens, domestic abuse, seek help. This show is all about creating awareness, stimulating expectations, manifesting hope for those who have been survivors or even those who are victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence. If you would like to participate today, we are available live on Facebook and we're streaming along on YouTube as well. So you can send us message using your WhatsApp signal on that your phone, on your device that you're using now. And this particular show will run between, it's just gone past 11 now, up until just before 1 o'clock. And it happens on Thursdays, live on 97.1 FM, Faza. Today, we will be proceeding from where we stopped last week. Those who listened to us last week, by now, I expect you to come up with some questions. If you have questions, if you have observations, if you have contributions to make, again, the place to go is make comments on your YouTube channel to us, connect us on Facebook, and you can also do so looking out for our show. There's a piece of our show on the Radio Faza website. So last week, we set out making an attempt to define what domestic abuse means. And we're also looking at what sexual abuse or sexual violence means. And I was not the only one on the show. I have with me today, again, our regular guest, Veronica Simpson. Veronica is very passionate about raising domestic abuse and sexual violence awareness, training, and she also supports survivors of abuse. She studied at Birkbeck University in psychodynamic and psychotherapy counseling. She is a registered independent domestic violence advocate, IDVA, supporting those suffering from or at risk of domestic abuse and sexual violence, DASV. Veronica was nominated and awarded Women Appreciating Women Award winner in the year 2020. 100 Inspirational Women nominee, and she takes number 50 in the year 2019. This show, to be honest, is about creating awareness that even it still happens and it's real that in the 22nd century, we still have homes, we still have families, we still have people, irrespective of their gender, whether non-gender specific, irrespective of their color, their race, people of all nations still experience modern day slavery, unfortunately. They experience control, they experience manipulation, sadly. Many are helpless behind the screens. So it's to such categories of people in our community, in our faith groups, in our homes, in our families, that we have packaged together this show, and it is for those who need to be treated fairly, those who need to be listened to, those who need to be given due benevolence, to reduce to the barest minimum victims of abuse, of rape, of honor marriage, female genital mutilations, and so on and so forth, not only in Nottinghamshire, but in our generation. Finally, to survivors, we want to encourage this morning that there's room for rehabilitation, there's room for therapy, there's room for training. So please sit back, don't touch the dial, enjoy the show, be part of it.
So yes, as I was saying, emotional behavior, emotional abuse and financial.
So there's the physical bit of it, there's the emotional bit of it. Can you shed light on the emotional abuse, for instance? What's when we say someone is emotionally abused? How did that happen? What exactly?
Okay, so
how do our listeners know, who has been emotionally abused, whether they are friends, what should they be looking out for? How will they know when they have colleagues or friends who are trying to cover up, wanting to be, you know what I mean? They don't want their family honor stained. They don't want the names. They don't want anything that will make their husband or their wives to be publicly stained. So they make up. You can use that word. So is there any way as a friend next door, I can easily know whether I have my neighbor or my friend next door experiencing emotional abuse?
It's difficult to say whether or not, because it depends on the victim survivor and how the outward display, how they, because once they are outside of the four walls, it depends on how they project themselves. Whether they share the information with somebody else or not, whether they're tearful. If somebody's tearful, it's, you can ask them, are you okay? What's happened? But if they come out and they've put their makeup on and they're put together quite well, it's going to be difficult for anybody to be able to identify that individual is going through emotional abuse, whereas the physical abuse, it's more in your face.
So it's possible to be emotionally abused and people contain their emotions, especially those who are not usually cheerful. So there's a possibility, isn't it? And there is a whole lot of difference in ranges of observations of physical manifestations now when we talk of physical abuse itself, in that it is the people that you can actually see, observe marks on their body. But there's not much about that. If the marks are covered by clothes or something. But if it is evident, like facially, we can tell, isn't it? And then the same thing goes for emotional abuse. For somebody that is not cheerful, except the person opens up to you in confidence, you may not be able to. So these are variations that can get us to be confused, uninformed, misled, and yet abuse is going on. Just looking at these two, am I correct?
I think just to put it in context, emotional abuse is attack on the woman's personality, on an individual's personality, rather than on their body. So how is that, what does that look like? It's things like calling that person names, derogatory names, putting that person down, making the person feel bad about themselves. So, you know, if for somebody that is suffering domestic abuse, that it's the feeling, they know when they're being abused. They know that something isn't right. They will know because their instincts will inform them that, you know, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right with them. And that sometimes is what they ignore, and the abuse continues because it isn't all the time. It happens, you know, one minute that the abuser might be really nice to them, and then the next they're being verbally or emotionally abusive towards them. But I definitely would say that, you know, if somebody is suffering of domestic abuse, they will know when they don't feel right. And that's the time when they should really look to speak to someone or get the help that they need. If they're constantly feeling bad about themselves because of the way that their partner, their family member is making them feel, then that's a definite sign that the abuse, the relationship may not be a healthy one, because somebody should not be constantly feeling bad about themselves in any relationship. You know, it's about kind of equality, and not for somebody else to over, you know, to control and have that kind of power over an individual. And that's what domestic abuse is. It's power and control over another individual. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
dear listeners, we're going to have a short break now, but before that, this morning we've heard and we have listened to various inputs and contributions onto what exactly domestic abuse, what exactly it looks, and Veronica is here shedding light onto what it really is to suffer physical abuse, to suffer emotional abuse. And we're going to continue after this break to look at the various other types of abuses that can be experienced domestically. You just hold on, don't touch the dial. Only on 97.1 FM.
Yeah, hi. I think we were talking about emotional abuse and verbal abuse, and I think the two kind of marry together. And we were just saying that, you know, how do you know? How do you know that you're being verbally or emotionally abused? And, you know, I always say to people that they should trust their intuition. We've all, you know, our bodies are made up in such a way that when something doesn't feel right, you know, it's a clear indication that, you know, something isn't right, and that's when you need to explore it. And certainly when you first start in a relationship first starts, or you're newlywed, that, you know, they call it the honeymoon period, where people feel comfortable with each other, they want to please each other and things like that.
No faults found at that time.
Yeah, with very, very few, I would say. And the faults that
There's no faults.
people,
Everything is perfect. Everyone is happy. Yeah.
and the faults that they may see, they may ignore, you know. And, you know, we know that phrase that says red flags, but there certainly are red flags, right from the offset. And I say that because multiple times when I've carried out a consultation with somebody that suffered abuse, they will say that looking back, there were red flags, there were warning signs, you know, and they chose to ignore it because it's all kind of wrapped up. It's quite subtle because, you know, if somebody is right at the beginning of a relationship, if someone is always nasty towards you, always abusive towards you, at that early stage, it's going to be easy to walk away. But when you know, you've had a period of time where, you know, that honeymoon period has been quite sweet, and then it becomes sour, it's less, it's more difficult, more challenging, shall we say, for the individual to pick up, you know, their bags or whatever, or end the relationship.
Sorry. I'm just going to interrupt you again, Veronica. So you have to pardon me. Yes, don't forget your line of thought. So basically, it is, will you then advise at such an early stage? Is there anything that anyone can do at that early stage to sort of quickly address things that can ultimately, things that you consider as red flags now, that can ultimately bring about the suffering of abuse in the relationship? Can something be done earlier on, or is just natural to cover up and pretend as if, oh, it doesn't really matter? I don't want this
Um,
person to feel bad. Let's just coast along. Is there anything
I don't,
as a counselor, we want to advise anything for the
as
benefit
a,
of
as
the
a,
younger ones that are yet to go into relationship or something? Yeah, in the
I think
community.
as a specialist in domestic abuse, looking at unhealthy relationships, I think that everybody's different. Everybody's different. Some people, you say the wrong thing to them, and they will be like, this isn't for me, and I'll walk away. But other people may endure it a lot longer. It just depends on the individual. But what I encourage is, if you are uncertain whether you're being abused, because some people think that if they're not being physically abused, then it's not abuse, it's not identified as abuse. They don't think about the sexual side, the financial side, the verbal, the emotion, the psychological. They don't see that as domestic abuse. It's, like what we're doing today, we're putting the spotlight on domestic abuse so people have a better understanding. But it's an individual by individual basis. And if it doesn't feel right, if you have to question your partner's behavior, then I say at that stage, you should start to have conversations. Don't, keep it to yourself, but have conversations with somebody else and just say, look, last night this happened. What do you think? And if something else happens, but keep that communication open, because it seems that the reason why people don't want to talk about it is because they don't want to kind of believe that is what they're experiencing. So they might minimize and justify the behavior of an individual and not talk about it because they've just shown this person off to their family and friends as their new husband, their new partner, and so they don't want they don't want other people to look at them in an unpleasant way, in a
Another bad,
negative
yeah,
light.
yeah,
So they tend to
yeah.
not say
So,
anything because they haven't made the decision to leave the relationship, and they know that it will impact the way that people see that individual. They tend not to say something. And we have to think about those that have kids as well. They might not talk about
so
it
it's
because of the
possible.
children in the family unit.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to be talking about children, child abuse in domestic violence also. We'll be looking at the impact it has on children in coming weeks. But talking about within the marital settings within the home now. So then, are we going to say that I think that ideally communication, there should be room for communication, and in doing during the early stages of the relationship, and that happening could help to an extent if they will understand themselves better than they were imagining, because now the reality is dawning on both parties, if I can say that. And then secondly, is it possible that people could be subjecting themselves to potential abuse, especially when we talk of verbal, emotional abuse? Sometimes one of the two people in a relationship can say something by reason of him just being who he is or who she is, and the person has not seen anything wrong in the comments they make, in the things they say, and yet it is hurting the other party. I don't know whether you understand what I mean.
Yeah,
The other
100%. But
party is definitely being hurt. Yes.
I think
And could it also be that they do not want to be confrontational, and They are keeping things under the carpet until things get worse. So these are things that at early stages, people need to be real about. You need to be authentic, who you are, who your partner is, and how can you get the best out of one another. Am I correct? You are the counselor.
I think that, you know, in normal relationships, yes, but definitely not when it comes to abusive relationship. It doesn't work in the same way. It doesn't work in the same way. The
Okay.
perpetrator knows exactly who they are. They know who they are. The victim survivor that, you know, doesn't know who this person is. They're going to learn to get to know who that person is. And they're not going to show their true self, their true colors right in the first instance. They are going to wait until there's a level of security, a level of, you know, the relationship has developed in some kind of way. For some, not all, because some perpetrators, you know, within the same nights, they will show how abusive they are. They might not be abusive to that individual, but they will demonstrate that they have that kind of energy and that kind of aggression and that kind of they'll be intimidating and violent towards other people. And they might think, some people might think that, okay, he's doing it to, or she's doing it to that individual, maybe they won't do it to me. But it's that a perpetrator of abuse knows who they are. They know that it's only a matter of time before the power and control element of who, or characteristic, or their determination, their objective, that they are actually going to start controlling that individual,
Okay,
because that is
thank you,
the aim.
Veronica.
That
So
is the
that
aim.
leads me, that leads me, that leads me to my next question. Could someone be an abuser, a perpetrator, and he or she doesn't know that he really is or she really is? It's just their nature. And can they be spoken to by their partners to change their pattern of speaking, behavior? You know, I don't know whether you understand what I mean. Is it possible
Is it possible for them to change? Did you say? What did you say?
to
Sorry,
be
Olu.
abusers?
Yes.
Could they be abusers? And they themselves don't even know that actually I am an abuser. Could they be controlling? And they just, it's just their nature. They do not intend to harm. I don't know whether you understand me.
I
It
think
is
that
just
they,
their nature. And then you know, of course, violence is not a good one anyway. Violence is part of the things mentioned, control, manipulation. But living out, especially in the area of emotional abuse, when you talk of verbal abuse, even sometimes the raising of tones. I don't know whether you understand me. When you raise your tone, when you how you say something could be offensive. So is it possible just to give that kind of benefit of the doubt to concerning those who are abusers? Could that be a possibility?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say
Okay.
no.
So you think
It's not.
it is intention you think it could be
What I'm going to say.
intentional then?
What I'm going to say is that they may not, and it's unlikely that any perpetrator of abuse is going to say, I am a perpetrator of abuse. They're not going to identify themselves as being a perpetrator of abuse. And that's the way we term um, them and their behavior as perpetrators of abuse. But I don't believe that they identify themselves as being perpetrators. I don't believe that they, some, not all, um, will some will justify the abuse, some will justify what they do. It was because you didn't, the dinner that you cooked wasn't very nice. It's because you don't look very nice today. It's because your skirt's too short. It's because you know, you went out today. They will see it as justifiable, but for that person that they're now controlling, that person that they're now withdrawing their own self will, their own free will from, then that person's going to be able to, they will know that what's happening is something wrong, something isn't quite right. But I don't believe the perpetrator of abuse is going to say, you know, yeah, I'm abusive. However, after the fact, after they've been abusive, there's going to be time of reflection. There's going to be a time of reflection, and I think
Who reflects here now? Is
I
it the
think both.
abuser or the abusee?
I think both will reflect on what's just happened. Why did it happen? You know, I think for the abuser might think, oh, you know, maybe I went too far, or she deserved it. But whatever the perpetrator is thinking and feeling after an incident, it needs to be enough for them to change their behavior. If it doesn't change their behavior, then they see it as justifiable. They'll make excuses. And what they do tend to do is to blame the victim. It was your fault. See what you made me do. If you didn't do this, had you done that, you know, had you put the children to bed when I got home, I was tired or whatever. But the thing is, for us to be able to understand that some people say that the perpetrator has anger issues, but we cannot use that as an excuse. Because Ulu, if I'm angry with everyone. I don't go home, close my door, and then start beating up the person that I, you know, supposed to love. I'm going to be angry with everyone. But a perpetrator of abuse closes the door and then they're abusive. Nobody else knows that side of that individual. Only the people inside the home. In terms of the outward display, how they behave outside the home, most people think that they're charming and that they're really loving, and you know their profile looks great because no one knows what they're doing inside the home, which makes it even more difficult for the victim to talk and to speak out about the abuse that they're suffering as well.
Amazing. Interesting. So there should be no time, basically, that we will make excuses for anyone's abuse. And an average abuser is intentional about what they're doing. And they do it possibly to hurt. And they do it, when they do it, it's possible for them to reflect positively, or it is possible for them to reflect in the negative sense. In the positive sense, they're thinking, oh, I'll probably make him or her feel bad. Oh, I don't mean to do that. I'm going to change. Is that not a possibility? And on the other side, it is also possible for them to feel, oh, I'm happy. I gave it to him. I gave it to her. And those are actually chronic abusers who are intentional about it. Am I correct in my sense of?
I think that, you know, if a perpetrator of abuse wants to intimidate, wants to manipulate, wants to control, wants to coerce, what they're doing, they're stripping the identity of an individual to make that person who they believe they should be. So, you know, when we're talking about domestic abuse, we're talking about control. We're talking about where somebody can't go shopping. They can't go to their GP. They can't go and see family and friends. You know, they have to cook what that individual wants them to cook. They have to wear what that individual wants them to wear. And if not, and if you don't do that, it's going to create conflict. So if I say, no, I'm not doing this, Ulu, you should say, okay, well, I'd like you to, but if you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. But when I'd say, you better do it, and if not, you know what's going to happen. I'm going to be so annoyed. You know, and that's where the emotional abuse comes in, the verbal abuse, the threats, the intimidation, the control, the gaslighting, all of these things. As I said before, if it doesn't feel right, if you're in an abusive relationship and it doesn't feel right, whatever your partner does, when they do something and it makes you feel a particular way, in a negative way, then seek help, get advice, get some support, speak to someone about what you're feeling. Even if, you know, it's always going to be confidential. It's always going to be confidential. And, you know, when you speak to somebody outside of your friendship group or your family, you know that they're going to be completely honest with you about what you share, but also give you the best advice as well. So, you know, if you are going through any of these things and it resonates, get the help that you need. You don't need to be on your own.
Thank you very much, Veronica. We're going to go on another break very soon. But before we do that, the things you're looking out for in the community, in the home, in the family, on the streets, are those things that resonate us, control us, coercion us, verbal abuse us, threat us, power control us, violence us, aggression, and manifestations of all manner of things to make people feel bad, intimidation, especially within, discussing within the home setting. That's why it's called domestic violence or domestic abuse. So if you happen to be a victim, or probably you are a survivor, or you're just managing relationships, this is the time to shout out. And as you have heard Veronica said, everything you share with us, when you come out to seek help, you do so in confidence. We are very confidential. In fact, you could remain anonymous. We are not interested in your name. We're not interested in your address. All we're interested in is the fact that you are a victim, you are passing through these things that we have been discussing. You can resonate with it, you can identify with it, and it's something that's really happening with you. That's why you are reaching out to us on that WhatsApp telephone number, that you need assistance, you need help. And in confidence, you'll be reached. You'll be reached, you'll be advised, you'll be told what to do, how to go about it. You are not going to be silent unto death. You are not going to be quiet until irreversible harm happens to you. So, dear listeners, we cannot say everything on a day at a go. All we want to implore you is that this is the time for you, if you need help, to cry out. Don't be quiet, don't be silent. This is the time for you to reach us on that WhatsApp signal on your phone. And this is the time for you to pass comments via YouTube, because we are streaming live on YouTube as well. And you can also reach us on Facebook. So long as you are hearing and listening to us, there must be a way of you reaching us through these various communication channels or through these various social media platforms. You don't know how to do it? Ask a friend to support you, to reach us. We are more than happy to come back to you in a very, very anonymous manner, and we guarantee you confidentiality of the highest order. So you are not going to be exposed to any form of attack, and yet you will be helped. So we guarantee you that. So we are drawing a curtain today to this show, and we just implore you to join us again next week on this same 97.1 FM Faza Radio. It's being hosted by the Destiny Curators, and we are here for you, and we trust that you will connect with us 11 o'clock next Thursday. So, Veronica, do you want to say goodbye to our dear listeners?
Thank you for listening, listeners. We hope that you will be locked in again next week at the same time, 11 until 1. Thank you very much, Olu, for having me again.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Veronica.
afternoon, everyone.
We are happy to have you always. Dear listeners, as I said, we just have to stop here. So we'll see you again next week. Thank you very much for your time. Have a nice day.